Hey, thanks everyone for listening and watching, sharing with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe. Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing is brought to you by Travelopod. For destinations like Africa, Japan, Antarctica, India, and the Northern Lights regions, start your journey with Travelopod. Visit vacation.travelopod.com.
Almost every single one of us wants the same things for our lives, which is stability for my generation, safety and dignity for my parents' generation, and a world of opportunity for my son's generation.
In this kind of tangle of economic and social and geopolitical uncertainty that we're in right now, is there a sort of a priority area that you would want to work on first as a legislator?
I am the only past school principal running for Congress this cycle across the entire country. And I really want to be a voice in DC for great educational opportunities, not just for students in the K-12 system, but for every single American, because I know what a critical engine that is for people to become the masters of their own destinies. Hello, everyone. My name is Pia Dandiya, and I am running for U.S. Congress in Florida's 22nd District. And this is Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Pia Dandiya, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. You know, we all know that the power of any individual is best exercised in a democracy through our vote. And as we come up on midterm elections here in the US, I'm so keenly attentive to the courage that it takes not only to lead a campaign that is unifying us and offering a voice to our community, but also in the courage that it takes to help govern and execute on ideas with respect and vision. And when we think of American excellence, Indian origin leaders have been making their presence felt in so many different ways in so many emerging arenas, particularly though in the political and governing arena. And I'm so pleased to share a conversation with Pia Dandiya, a former high school principal and former White House fellow who was born and raised in Florida and now is running as a congressional candidate in Florida's 22nd District. Pia, thanks for taking some time with me, and welcome to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I hope that by the end of this talk, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that that's already the case. But in the meantime here, I mean, I have to ask you, the first thing about trust is kind of knowing where you are and how you fit in. I will say this, I have to ask you that with the new contours of the 22nd District, how much organizing around a map have you had to do in the last couple of weeks and really just sort of getting to know your district a little bit better, especially as kind of the new district lines were drawn?
Yes, so I am running in Florida's 22nd District, as you mentioned, and the good news is that I am running still in my home county of Palm Beach County, where I was born and raised. This new district encompasses Palm Beach County, as well as Broward County, Collier County, and Hendry County. So that is a change. And yet at the same time, two things are true. The first of which is that I am still representing my home state and my home county, that where I was born and raised. And I know that those values that I was raised with are enduring here, even during these political times. And secondly, I've been really grateful to meet so many folks on the campaign trail over the last year in Palm Beach County, as well as other nearby counties. And the message that I have received from them is a resounding one. And that is that almost every single one of us wants the same things for our lives, which is stability for my generation, safety and dignity for my parents' generation, and a world of opportunity for my son's generation. And as I make this shift into a new district, those messages still are the ones that are front and center. And the policy priorities to help us make those come to life are also very similar. So in that way, it's really heartening to see that not only is my home state enduring in its values, but what our people need across district lines, no matter when they change or how they are gerrymandered, also remains the same.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how, how much in common we have. And especially when you talk about transcending generations like this, you're someone who's no stranger to, that front row seat of navigating among parents as a high school principal, among students, of course, and the students that you lead, but then also thinking about those who are not yet in high school or not yet sort of under your purview as a principal. I feel like serving as a high school principal sort of is a PhD in problem solving on an everyday basis. So, was there a philosophy or an approach to problem solving as a principal that's guided you through the kind of different barriers and roadblocks that you face in running a political campaign, whether it's redistricting or getting to know new constituents or finding how to navigate through disagreements among your constituents? How has that philosophy or approach as a principal kind of helped guide you?
Yeah, I really appreciate you making that parallel because I found that there are so many similarities in having had the privilege of leading a community of high school students and families and now running for office. And I believe that it was the ultimate lesson in human personality and problem solving, like you said. And I think, the way I think about this race is that it's the same mission as starting a high school in Harlem, where the odds were unlikely that people thought the odds were unlikely that we would get with 86% of students living below the poverty line, that we would get 100% of them off to college. And the reason that matters and what's at stake is the same exact thing as this congressional race, which is when you serve one member of a family community well, you create intergenerational change. We would say this with my high schoolers all the time, that when we change their life trajectories, it impacts the generation above them and the generation below them. And I believe the same exact thing is true for great governance. And when it comes to problem solving, what I learned as a principal is that you have to be really skilled at getting creative about how you're going to get to the end goal without compromising that end goal. We started a high school saying we were going to get 100% of our students into college. And yet every single day brought its own unpredictabilities and challenges, whether it was students going through crises at home, whether it was unexpectedly a heater breaking on a cold winter day, whether it was threats from outside of the school with gangs waiting for our students at dismissal. And what I learned in that process is that we as leaders need to be maniacal about not compromising the end goal, but creative about how we are going to get there and be ready to cut through the nonsense and the dysfunction to get the work done. And I think that that is the exact kind of energy we need in DC nowadays. We need leaders who are going to cut through the dysfunction, legislate for the future, who are willing to make connections in a bipartisan way towards the end goal, regardless of how much creativity is required. I think that same approach to problem solving applies here, and I hope to bring it to DC.
You mentioned this philosophy and that resonates with me particularly, both as a parent and as a pediatrician. But I'm curious about one thing, like you mentioned, people are fed up in a way and they're so jaded about what happens in Washington, DC. Voters' patience is running thin. And patience is something that you really, really had to, hold on to as a principal and as a problem solver. So I mean, how do you tell frustrated voters who are looking for change like right away, when you know that patience is something that is required? And how do you solve some of those frustrating moments that you might have with people? And you've had to deal with that before with parents and other constituent or other stakeholders who are looking for problem solving right at this moment.
Mhm. I think the first question I always ask myself is, where's that frustration coming from? And I think that with voters, it's coming from a lack of trust and disappointment. And I think that we have to address that head on and make people feel like we are building a campaign that is different from the way they have engaged with politics in the past. And I have to tell you that in talking to families, especially as a past educator, and talking to retired folks who have grandchildren, there is a sense of connection there because I really am passionate that we have a new generation of leaders in DC who have actually served communities in the way that we want them to have created change. And that's the kind of leadership that I hope to bring to the federal government and to be a part of a new group that does. And I mention that because I think it takes one to know one, and individual conversations focused on the specifics and also being a listener and then connecting that back to your prior professional experiences has been really effective for me. And I have to tell you that some of the biggest compliments I've gotten, or I feel are compliments, is when people have said at the end of a conversation, I feel like you really understand, or She's one of us. She gets it. And I think we need to continue chipping away at what I believe is not 1 year work, but 2 year work, 4 year work, 6 year work, at legislating for a future that is worthy of our families and that is worthy of the students that I served. And so I think one piece is really showing people they can have a different experience with people who want to run for office and being a good listener. And then the second piece is setting expectations about how we are going to do this work, not in a way that's just attention grabbing, but in a way that's meaningful and sustained. And I think most of us can get behind that. And most voters are very realistic and bought into that kind of vision, in my experience.
Yeah, it takes this kind of creative tension between the problem solving of right now, but also being transparent about what you can and what you aim to do in the next 2, 4, 6, 10 years of the kind of long game here. Your campaign, one of your campaign mantras sort of speaks to finding areas for families to not just survive, but to thrive. And in this kind of tangle of economic and social and geopolitical uncertainty that we're in right now, is there a sort of a priority area that you would want to work on first as a legislator to sort of support that initial jolt that working families are really craving right now, something that says, hey, you know what, this here's someone who's one of us, who's supporting us? Is there kind of a first area of prioritization that you would have as a prospective legislator?
Absolutely. I hear time and time again from voters that cost of living is the issue that is keeping them up at night. And I think that the number one way we build trust with voters is by immediately legislating on common sense solutions to these challenges. And in Florida, for example, our housing costs have become really untenable for working families. It surprises people to know that places in South Florida are on par with the national poverty rate. Because when we think of sunny South Florida, we think of vacation areas and paradise, and we don't assume that there's quiet poverty tucked in corners that you won't see when you're driving down the street. And so, a number one priority for me would be to legislate on how we are going to increase housing supply and incentivize with builders building not just luxury housing here, but middle income and affordable housing. Most people are surprised to know that in Palm Beach County, 1 in 6 office buildings is vacant. We should be speeding up permitting and incentivizing builders to turn those buildings into housing for elderly citizens, for young professionals, and for veterans. And the way that I think about it, to go back to your early mention of not just surviving, but thriving, is that first we need to legislate for stability. And after we legislate for stability, which includes things like housing supply, then we need to legislate for opportunity. And opportunity looks like excellent educational programs, excellent workforce development, especially in the age of AI. And I am the only past school principal running for Congress this cycle across the entire country. And I really want to be a voice in DC for great educational opportunities, not just for students in the K 12 system, but for every single American, because I know what a critical engine that is for people to become the masters of their own destiny. So I would say it's stability first and opportunity second.
I love that. I mean, so when you build stability and then opportunity, there's always this question for youth and young people who are entering the job market right now, where they're really at this interesting inflection point, right? And you've worked in both the public and the private sector. Young people in Florida and young people everywhere right now are sort of faced with this idea of skill building in the AI era. So how do you hope to help those young adults navigate those kind of skill buildings opportunities and find jobs in 2026 and beyond? Because as you mentioned, right, this is if you are going to create opportunity, there's also a cost to that, whether it's in the time and effort that it takes to build these skills or being able to help small businesses and other sort of endeavors build those growth opportunities and find jobs for those youth.
So I'm really glad that you have raised this, because I think that AI is the number one priority that we need to put front and center as we plan for the future in DC. And right now, there is no AI caucus. We need to be getting ahead of what we know is an inevitable change that is going to have many great benefits for us as well. It's not all doomsday in that our productivity as a country is going to go to unprecedented levels. In healthcare, there are going to be so many benefits to early detection and screening. And even in terms of access to information that could, who knows how it could democratize the way young people are growing. So I want to put that out there, because I think that that there are many positive benefits, and yet we need to have our eyes wide open that companies like Amazon are saying that in the next 2 years, they plan to automate 500,000 jobs. And these are not just entry-level jobs. There are also mid-level jobs that it's going to impact. And so as we think about our workforce, there's going to be a seismic effect. And I think there are two priorities that elected officials should really commit to following through on as our young people are getting ready for this new workforce. The first piece is, what are the new industries where we are going to need new talent? And how are we shoring up our local community colleges and our colleges and universities across the country to provide realistic, implementable skills that our young people can develop in a relatively quick amount of time so that they can go into the workforce armed with the skills that our local economies are going to need? I would be a big fan of investing in community colleges, understanding what those needs are and building quick skill building programs, especially in the form of paid apprenticeships for career changers, and not just focusing on students who are in college, because we know both groups will need that. And then taking one step back from there, thinking about what this means for K-12 education. I firmly believe that no matter how much AI impacts our world and the seismic shift that's on its way, there will be no replacement for the in-person value of having a teacher in a classroom. I think that the mentorship and the leadership that those teachers provide is irreplaceable. And yet there's a world in which they will be able to be much more individualized facilitators for students using AI in smart ways than they have been in prior technological moments for our country. And I think ushering in our schools to figure out how they can use AI as tools for impressive personalization, where teachers are the facilitators, will be really important, because while AI is going to change some of the skills our students need, it is not going to change their need to read and to critically think. And teachers are going to be front and center there. So I think those are two important priorities that all elected officials in my worldview should commit to when it comes to community colleges and career changers, as well as the K-12 space.
I like the idea of impressive personalization because, as an impressive person that you're showcasing some of these ideas, it's true that it's still one person, right? So like as you become poised to become a member of Congress, how does one single member mitigate some of these really, really large issues, whether it's cost of living and whether it's AI or whether it's climate action? How do you bridge things from the congressional table to the kitchen table so that you can act upon the promises and the ideas that you are sharing right now on the campaign?
Well, first and foremost, I think that we have to be open to writing a new chapter in our politics of great bipartisan legislative work. I have learned on the campaign trail that across political party, 80% of us agree on 80% of things. That's a whole lot of great work that we can do, especially in a moment in time where we have so many critical questions that we need to find answers to, whether it is AI, whether it is education, whether it is social security, healthcare, or our deficit. And all of these issues that I have mentioned are not exclusively Democratic issues, and they are not independent issues or Republican issues. There are red, white, and blue issues that every single person in DC should have a vested interest in legislating on if they care about progress and probably re-election more than they care about performative politics. And so I think that it will be really important for me to be a bridge builder in DC, not in a way that compromises my values, but in a way that is maniacally focused on that end goal, but creative about how we are going to get there. And I will say that we are seeing indicators in the last 6 months with congressional votes of Republicans thinking about life beyond this current administration. There were 7 people who voted in line with Democrats to ensure that healthcare prices did not rise. Now, I gotta believe that some of them were thinking about their life beyond this current administration in making that decision, because healthcare is something that affects us all. And so I think we need to seize upon this moment to figure out how we are going to work towards great bipartisan legislation that is rooted in our shared best interest. Because in my view, if in the long run in our country, if we don't have unity, we don't have anything. And we really have to focus on those 80% of things that 80% of us agree on. There is a few years of really important work for us to do to address those critical issues of our time. And I think that has to be the first starting point in terms of a hopeful chapter in DC.
Hi, friends. You may have visited Italy and seen all the highlights, but exploring Europe or Asia for a more immersive vacation is where the details truly matter. That's why so many trust Travelopod for personalized custom experiences. From small group travel to complex planning for any destination, the pros at Travelopod can help make your trip seamless, affordable, and unforgettable. With thousands of five-star ratings and stress-free booking and support, Travelopod is your trusted partner for unforgettable experiences around the world. Visit vacation.travelopod.com. Pia, you mentioned a lot of this coalition building, and I'm someone who's a Democrat, and I'm also fiercely moderate in my democratic values. And yet there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do collectively, whether it's, those who are Democrats or Republicans or independents. For you personally, what have you had to unlearn about yourself to become an effective leader of a campaign, an effective fundraiser, someone who can build coalitions? What do you think? Because I feel like politics is the ultimate lesson in humility, right? So,
Yes, it
you know,
really
what,
is.
what have you had to kind of unlearn about yourself so far?
It's funny you asked this in the context of us also both being South Asians, in that I think up until this point in my career, I have really prided myself on being an executor, on being someone who is able to process lots of information quickly by practice and then execute on a plan. I always say, I may not be the smartest person in the room, but I will outwork anyone. And I wear that badge with pride, and I still do in this campaign. But something that I think is very different about a campaign that I began to learn as a teacher and a principal is that what you say doesn't matter as much as how you make people feel. And I think that especially in this political moment, there is no replacement for voters to feel authenticity and relatability in candidates, and that they have their best interests at heart. And so this has been a moment to unlearn that when you show up to the table, the number one singular most important thing is not necessarily your competence. It is about having a strong mind, but it's also about having a strong heart and making sure people can feel that from you. And that has been a really powerful unlearning for me.
When it comes to leaving people with that important feeling of inclusion and again building trust and building and cultivating those relationships in a political time right now, and even the sort of social climate where people further and further are being marginalized. I wanted to think about this one with you particularly in that, specifically as an Indian American, as a South Asian American, someone who was born and raised in Florida and has seen so many different life cycles of what the kind of social climate is there. What does American patriotism look like to you in 2026, and particularly in running this campaign just nearby where you were born and raised?
So I really appreciate this question because I am running for Congress because I love my country and I'm so grateful for what this district and this country has given me and my family. And I want to ensure that future generations have that same experience that my family did in one generation. And that has been the mission of my life in my career, to make the American dream that my family experienced more within reach for others. And I think about this metaphor that I think will answer your question, which is that metaphor of leadership where you see a leader who is trying to lead a horse on a carriage. And they are sitting on the carriage and they have some kind of stick to lead along the horse. And then there are people in front of the horse who are pulling along the carriage. That's one model of leadership, which I feel like is the direction we have felt our politics has been going in this current moment. My view of what American patriotism is that nobody is at the front putting a stick on that horse, but instead everyone is in front of that horse, pulling the carriage arm in arm together towards a future that is inclusive of us all and has a place for every single one of us and is reflective of every single one of us' hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. That is the version of America that I believe that 95% of us believe in. And that is the version of American patriotism that I want to stand for. A place that says, you know what, America can be a place of stability and opportunity for every single one of you. And you can experience the American dream if you're brave enough to try and ready to work hard. And that is what I hope this campaign reflects as we get closer and closer to November.
How does your Indian Americanness matter when it comes to sharing that example and finding commonalities and understanding your constituents in a way that makes you very unique?
Think that people who have a counterpoint to American democracy in their lived experience have a newfound appreciation for this country that can be very refreshing for folks who have been here for generations without ties elsewhere. So, growing up, we would visit India often, and it was my first brush with the notion that all democracies are clearly not created equal, and that I have a lot of gratitude for what this country has given me. And I talk a lot about that on the campaign trail. People wonder, this name, Pia Dandiya, where is it from? I
Right.
know you're from Florida, but I don't think you're originally from the United States. And that brings up a really organic conversation about my life story and why I have such a sense of purpose and optimism about where we can go if we commit ourselves to getting there. I want folks to feel comfortable asking me where my family is from and to learn about cultures and communities that may be different from theirs, because I certainly know how that's enriched my life and it's an important part about the fabric of America. So that's something that I want folks to feel comfortable with, and then to see that we share those same values that keep us up at night and get us out of bed every single day.
There's so many ways to connect the dots on all of these things, right? Your mom was a Montessori school teacher. She created a Montessori school, in your neighborhood. You became a high school principal. You've worked for Apple. You were a White House fellow. I mean, so many of these dots get connected now and are brought to life in a campaign. I'm curious for you, with all those things that motivate you on a day-to-day basis as a political candidate, but when did you actually fall in love with the idea of politics and civic engagement?
Fell in love with the idea of service after spending a summer in India after the my freshman year of college. And I worked with an NGO that was focused on uplifting dwellers in slum communities. And I taught English to a group of 30 students who were aged 7 to 17. And we learned, in fact, that they didn't need to learn English, but they knew English, but they had to build their confidence in speaking English. So one thing led to the next, and we ended up building out this great play that allowed them to speak English confidently with Bollywood interludes, of course. And as things unfolded, we thought this would be a performance in the community center, but the NGO decided to make this a big statement to the city. And we ended up hosting the event in a 500-person auditorium in New Delhi. And the chief minister of New Delhi came. My students were profiled on CNN India. It was like the best of a lifetime movie. And they killed the performance. And at the end of the performance, our main character, whose name was Bharti, she, incidentally, my mother's name, she is a 14-year-old at the time who was a firecracker. And I found her backstage crying after the play. And I asked her, Bharti, what's happening? Why are you crying? And she said through tears that morning, her father had told her as she was leaving the house not to leave and that she would make a fool of herself in front of the rich people, he said. And she told me, I told him I didn't care what he thought and I came anyway. And we had reserved the front row for parents. And she said, I saw him sitting in the front row after all, with tears streaming down his face the entire time, because for once I accomplished something that he thought even he couldn't accomplish. And I remember in that moment looking across that room backstage to see not a single dry eye, kids and adults alike, and that I'd never felt more alive than I did in that moment, because it made me realize what my purpose in life was as a 19-year-old. It
Mm.
was like colors were brighter, my purpose was clearer, and I knew then that I wanted to spend my life fighting for a world where every single person has the dignity to see who they can become. And if I could do that in a country that had given me so much, what a privilege that would be for me in terms of my life's calling. And that is what set me on this journey of being a teacher in high poverty schools in the United States, of becoming a young high school principal, of being a White House fellow, working on public sector projects at Apple, and now running for office. And I really want to fight for a future that's worthy of my students in the United States and worthy of people like Bharti.
When people hear this story, I mean, they're obviously captivated by, what kind of change that brought out for an individual. And of course, what kind of change that actually sparked in you. And when you zoom out from the micro to the macro, right? I mean, there are huge, huge issues related to Social Security and Medicaid and how to secure our climate future. I mean, all of these priorities that are out there, it feels sometimes like you're boiling the ocean. So when you get to actually legislating and even thinking about, like, how incumbents are currently legislating, how do you actually secure these future based issues that have impact right now, right? So, like whether it's climate, whether it's Social Security, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's healthcare, all these things actually are both secured and anchored in the now, but they also have great, great future impact, particularly when it comes to climate. How do you tackle all of these things without sacrificing the, like you said, sort of economic importance of the kitchen table conversation for a working family, where they're looking at those things right now, and those are the things that are on the kitchen table. And as a legislator, you have to be cognizant of all of that and really sort of be able to, again, try and boil the ocean in a limited 2-year term.
Learned that great leaders do a very effective job addressing short term priorities as effectively as the long term priorities that are going to take multi year work to accomplish. We have to do both at the same time. And I think that looks like on day one of being elected, working on not just hiring the most impressive social media team, but him hiring the most effective policy writers. I want to have the one of the most high functioning policy shops in DC that is focusing on the short term priorities that are keeping up voters at night, and that is also securing a stable and opportunity filled future for years to come. Just like running a school, I knew that I needed to run an environment where at the end of every single month, we had the mile markers that showed us that our students were on their pathway to college and that we were still preparing them with the social and the academic and the personal skills that at the end of 4 years would set them up to have successful lives. I think leaders who have led communities like that towards positive outcomes have on a more micro level that same experience. And I want to bring that same lens to DC, but armed with a great set of policy writers who will help take those short term and long term priorities and help make them come to life instead of falling prey to some of the performative politics that we see in some of our, news headlines these days. So that's an initial way that I would want to think about structuring it, knowing that I would have a ton to learn and that there would be some great other elected officials who have paved the way with some really meaningful work that may strengthen how we want to operate as well. But that's my initial thought, leveraging my principal Pia brain.
Hey, you know what? Leveraging our brains effectively is
Yeah.
definitely something that we have to do a lot more of.
Yeah.
And one final sort of thought when it comes to policy, when you think about how you're leading a campaign, and I've talked to other congressional members about this, that you're constantly both thinking a little bit about the governance aspect of this and what it means to your constituents and to the people who voted you into office. But then at the end of the day, politics is all about fundraising and all about securing your footing for the next campaign. And certainly in this campaign that you're running right now, how do you navigate that dance between really sort of crafting message, but also the fundraising part that is just really the reality of running a campaign in the United States today?
As a teacher and a principal, the idea of having to raise so much money as something I've never had to do before was off putting for me when I was really wrestling with this dream I have of serving my country in this way. And the more I learned about why we had to fundraise, the more I became comfortable with it, which is that without fundraising, you cannot communicate with the electorate what your vision is. And fundraising is the way that you show the state, but also the country that you have believers. And so that is really what has been my focus on the campaign trail is showing people when I am fundraising that I have believers and doing that in a way that is meeting people from all walks of life. Since January 1st, I have done 56 meet and greets in my home state to meet folks who are not necessarily resource donors, who may be activists in communities, who may be retired folks, who may be young professionals. And even these types of events have generated us a lot more contributors to our campaign because they believe in our message. And I think that fundraising is a way that, like I said, you show you have believers, but you also show that you can run a tight operation. And we need candidates, especially on the Democratic side, who not only have a great vision, but are really effective builders in this political moment, especially in states like Florida, in my toss-up seat. And that is how I have channeled my energies towards fundraising so that it's not living in a silo. It is focused on the same exact values and areas that that I want to focus on the campaign trail with voters that I discuss with them at meet and greets, that I discuss with donors who are seasoned institutional donors, that I discuss on social media. And I believe that a great fundraising program is one that has a pretty big overlapping Venn diagram with vision and mission for a campaign. And the more that Venn diagram is overlapping, the more effective our fundraising operation becomes, because that is how we show people we have believers, and that is how we keep building to actually communicate with all 700,000 voters. So that's how I've come to learn more about why the fundraising matters and do it in a way that is authentic to me and my mission of making the American dream within reach for more people.
Yeah, that authenticity is probably at the core of all of this, and trying to ensure that people are not only buying it, but they're believing it and they can also fuel it. Let me
Absolutely.
get you out of here on this one. For those who are getting to know you, and you spoke a little bit about this before, but I kind of want to reiterate this because it does speak back to, why at the end of the day, voting and how we actually get our voice out there is perhaps our only signature for optimism, right? I mean, like, this is the way in which voters and constituents can actually share their voice. But when people are meeting you for the very, very first time and they're just getting to learn a little bit about you, your story, and the vision that you're trying to bring to Florida's 22nd district, how do you hope they feel afterwards? What is it that you hope that they take away, both from the things they've learned about you, but then also, again, what they have in their heart when they walk away from a conversation with you?
Hope two things. I hope that they feel hope, that they feel a sense of optimism and a sense of possibility that our future could be better with leaders in DC who have a connection to them and their lived experience. And then secondly, I hope they feel purpose. And that is obviously the educator and the teacher in me, but I hope that they feel so encouraged and optimistic about the time we have spent together that they want to take that into action. And so if you're listening today, I hope that you have that same feeling. And I hope that you take that into action knowing that every single one of us has immense power, even in a political moment like this, because you have so many resources within yourself that you may not even realize. You have the resource of time. You have the resource of funds you could contribute to candidates that you believe in. You have the resource of your community that you could play connector to for candidates that you believe in. And any and all ways that you can contribute your resources to causes that that resonate with you is a very important way that you can serve this country. So I want to encourage you, if you like what you hear here, then please go to Pia for Congress, PIA, and learn more about our campaign. You can figure out how to volunteer. You can contribute resources. You can donate money. You can reach out to us at piaforcongress.com. Get involved, because I know that moments like this politically in our country's history can make one feel powerless. And if I have learned anything in running a school and now running a campaign, it is that every single one of us has so much more power than we realize. And it is incumbent on us, if we have true love for our country, to take that power and turn it into action now more than ever. And I would love to be a thought partner with you on how to do that. If you feel the fire, but you're not sure how to get started. So don't be a stranger, get involved and reach out, please.
Well, cultivating lots of trust through resources and, of course, helping people not only just find, but sustain that purpose. Yeah, what a treat to share some time with you. I know it's a busy time for you and for your team, but we really appreciate it. And I hope we can visit with you again down the road.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure. And it is my hope that we can work towards a stronger future for us all. So thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks again, Pia. And please visit piaforcongress.com to learn more about her and her campaign. Don't forget to please do your part and register. So go to vote.gov to learn more. I'm always grateful to all of you for subscribing and sharing this with your family and friends. Please remember to be safe, be smart, and be kind. Till next time, I'm Pia Dandiya.